So we're here at the conclusion of the second Daily Fantasy Sports Expo, which took place in Miami. And I'm here with Chris Costigan.
Costigan. DailyFantasy.com.
Okay, I always pronounce your last name wrong.
Costigan.
Yeah. I'm afraid of saying your name. Anyway, so all right, I'm here with Chris Costigan of Gambling 911, also DFS 911. And he hosted the final session, he moderated it. And we're going to review that, and we'll also review some other things that we learned at the event.
And Mark, I would say, having been at the other event, and this one is very intimate, this one was especially intimate. And one of the things I found speaking to people is that they were able to speak with people that they weren't able to as much at other events, not yours, but I'm saying
Right.
much larger events, whether it's in other industries or this one. And people were telling me that it's much, and I find the same thing, I've been to larger events, that it's much easier to meet people, get contacts that way. And in that sense, I think it was a success.
Oh yeah, no, I had
Even
no
myself, I learned some things. I made some good contacts here. So it was quite good in that sense.
Yeah, no, I had no complaints at this event.
And Mark, as we all know, this industry is in flux, and you and I were both concerned that it might not be successful, that people would be very fearful of coming because of certain issues with legalities in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
However, having spoken to people that are in the industry, a lot of people are telling me that this is actually a great time because DraftKings and FanDuel are fighting this. It gives these other companies a chance to grow, and they think DraftKings and FanDuel are going to be successful. They're paying a lot of money. They have lobbyists, and these companies. I asked one of the questions I asked on the panel was, "Are you threatened by a DraftKings or FanDuel?" Unanimously, everybody said no. They feel they bring them business. People see the ads. They come into DraftKings. They come into FanDuel. They go to the little guys. The little guys can offer much more, and you could win more on their sites.
On that note, there's two aspects of it. So number one, with regards to DraftKings and FanDuel, we learned from this event about the revenues of a site, how much a site makes. We'll get to that in a minute. But when they're spending the amount of money they're spending on lobbying and lawyers and things like that, that's got to be killing their bottom line. That's got to be crushing it to a large degree.
DraftKings and FanDuel do not make a profit.
Right, but that's not helping.
The smaller guys, let DraftKings and FanDuel do the dirty work for these smaller guys. The smaller guys aren't paying for lobbies. They're not paying for attorneys.
It sort of reminds me of, remember Party Poker was the first kind of really poker site to really push the market and get everyone into poker. But they're a player in the market. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean any disrespect to Party Poker, but they're not like a Poker Stars. They're not the leading player in the poker market like Poker Stars and some of the other companies out there.
But it's the same concept. DraftKings and FanDuel
forged the way for other companies to go through.
I'll give another example. Was in sports betting. We had Bet on Sports years ago, 10 years ago. Billboards, New York City, a bus would come through New York. People would see Bet on Sports. It's a big company. These guys are introduced to the industry. They're introduced to sports betting through Bet on Sports. It's the same thing with Daily Fantasy Sports. They're introduced to this industry from DraftKings and FanDuel. So in that sense, those two companies do very well for this industry.
So also following up on the final panel, I asked the question about how much is a player worth? What is the lifetime player value? And my impression of the answer, there was really no answer. I didn't expect an answer, by the way. I didn't expect a solid number. My impression of the answer is that no one knows really the lifetime player value. It's still an early industry. It's a budding industry. But there were some indications on what you can get monthly from a player. And I started extrapolating that a little further. So Melvin Wong had suggested that a player is worth, in some cases, $75 a month. That was RPU. But these being general. So, but if a player's worth $75, he was saying, look, you're giving out 90% of that. because that's what it is. It's not you're keeping all $75 of that. You're actually giving out 90% of it, or not even 95% of that. So that means for that one player on a monthly basis, you're only making $7.50 or $3.75. If it's 90%, obviously, then it's $7.50. If you're giving out 95%, then it's $3.75. But keep in mind, now you have your marketing costs, you have other costs also involved with your business, and you have to spend less than that. Let's say it's an annual basis, so say it's $70 to get it. It's not even annual, actually. That's what I was trying to explain. The player he's into a sport. That sport has a season. It's not $75 a month, 12 months of the year. It's $75 for whatever that season is. That's going to probably be your average player. I mean, yeah, okay, there are some hardcore players which play all the time, but most players will be for the season. So this sort of narrows that amount of money that you can make.
Good. I think this industry is going to have to work off of volume. I believe these companies think they can get it if they get in now. This is the perfect time to get in. I think you probably agree with me. Probably 3 years from now, it may be too late. It's like that with poker. It was like that with sports betting. Although I think now you could probably get into sports betting at this time because a lot of the competition has been eliminated.
Yeah, well, one of the things also with regards to the finances were, there were numbers touted out that the average players were $500 a year in expenditure, except kind of most of the people in the room agreed that that number's highly suspect. That's just what we believe is a made-up figure. It's probably a lot less. And so I agree. No, they're definitely going for volume. Even if you had that $7.50, let's say that's what you're making on a monthly basis on average. You multiply that by, let's say, 1,000 users, that's $7,500 a month. You multiply by 10,000 users, that's $75,000 a month. If let's say you've got enough sports and you've got enough things with 10,000 users coming and going, let's say 12,000 users. 12,000 users coming and going, and you're making, on average, let's say $7.50 off each user, that's $1 million a year. That's your revenue. And keep in mind, you have your marketing costs and your other costs involved with that, but you have to be less than $1 million a year to be profitable. But that's already at 10,000, 12,000 users. So already you're starting to scale for a startup. For a startup, you're starting to scale. Once you're beyond that, I imagine, then it should be fairly quick. You could be profitable. Mm-hmm. The other thing that came out of the event, by the way, was foreign markets, and I'm sure you had it discussed in the final panel.
And I'll tell you
where it's at.
It's extremely interesting, and I had no idea. We asked one of our experts on the panel. One of the participants asked, "What's the best country?" He responded. It was Thomas Varga from SazUp.com. He responded Brazil, and everybody on that panel agreed except Tyler. Tyler Vorpago, a representative from Wisconsin, because he obviously didn't know. And was kind of surprised by Brazil. Second, believe it or not, was, and you're gonna be shocked, was Egypt.
Yeah, I heard that.
that took me completely by surprise. They said unregulated. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but unregulated.
Pretty much. I mean,
a huge sports market. I have been involved in gaming for a long time, in sports betting. This is the first I heard.
Yeah, first Egypt. Yeah.
Maybe people in the industry will laugh at me. I was really Brazil. They were really gung ho about. They said it's going to be
Brazil does. He discussed it also earlier when he gave a presentation, and
this is somebody who's not from Brazil.
No, I got that. And I've done events in Brazil, and I've learned a lot about Brazil. Brazil has two major issues that you'd have to deal with if you're looking at getting into that market. And the first major issue is not, believe it or not, sports and things like that, introduction to sports, that's easy. That's the easy part. Get in and take your games and use your games, that's easy. Mobile, not a problem also, very easy. The problem is bifold. And the first is payments. And most credit cards are basically, I don't want to say non-existent, but they pretty much are almost non-existent. It's pretty hard to find credit card users down there. Most of them pay in cash through the post office or places like the post office where they pay their rent and their utility bills and things like that. And they pay for a lot of online services that way. There are services that have tried to pop up and other forms of payment systems that have tried to pop up. But still, that is the predominant way currently that people pay for things. So that would be an issue. Even if you got into those systems, there's people who take, a piece of the action along the way. So keep that in mind. It's not just they're paying and it's a small 2.5% credit card fee. It's a little bit more than that. The other thing, and it's multiple people, by the way, that are taking the action. The second thing also with Brazil is the tax rate for a corporation. If you're going to operate in Brazil, your competitors, and you're not from Brazil, your competitors are going to be all over you. And so, once you start rising above the radar, they're going to be pretty upset, and they're going to make the Brazil authorities aware of it, and they'll do whatever they can to just kind of shut you down.
Do you know anything about Egypt? That was a really surprising answer.
No. But I've done other events where, we're dealing with a nascent internet industry, and we're dealing with people dealing with North America, dealing with China, dealing with whatever, and then all of a sudden one guy's got a product and he's like got 3-4 million users, and I'm like, okay, where are your users based? And they're like, oh, Middle East. I'm like, huh? Apparently the Middle East, mobile market in the Middle East is taking off rather significantly, rather quickly, and a lot of people...
Oh, and mobile was brought up.
Yeah.
That was the main...
Yeah.
That was the main thing.
So Egypt being an interesting market, that I can see.
And the sports, not so much NFL. I mean, yes, obviously NFL, but soccer.
Soccer, of course, worldwide. I mean, once you leave the United States, it's going to be soccer. Once you leave the U.S. and North America, or should I say U.S. and Canada, pretty much soccer is going to dominate.
It's soccer. That's why Daily Fantasy Sports is going to explode in Europe and throughout Asia. Also, we talked about the Olympics, which, again, is interesting. Now, Representative Warpagel, I hope I'm saying it correctly.
You said it correctly.
Okay. Expressed concern. He said that it does, if you start off around the Olympics, even though the guys he's next to, eyes lit up because they want to do it. And one of the software companies we had up there, which was Fantasy Sports Solutions, Shapilov, they actually are able to offer that. However, it may not be a concern to you, in terms of legislation in Wisconsin, Representative Warpagel was concerned about that. He does feel that's a little bit more like it could be more on the lines of gambling, and it's the same thing. I've heard that also with golf. Golf is extremely popular with DraftKings and FanDuel. I've spoken to people in the industry who have said, look, that's what's going to get you in trouble.
Well, I think we're at a point now where, you can't... I was told by someone in the industry, before we ran the first event, please do us a favor, don't mention the word gambling at your conference. And I respected their wishes, and so I specifically did not. However, in other words, on the website, we discussed it a few times, maybe during some sessions, but it was not something overtly pushed out there. Kind of funny that the people who requested that are the ones that are in the spotlight most. But let's look at it for what it's worth. I mean, the argument is, they're trying to make it like it's a game of skill, like poker and things like that, and comparing it to poker. Just call it spade a spade.
It is a game of skill.
It is a game of skill. It's as close to gambling, or
it's a game of skill, and people will argue that poker should be allowed because, it's a form of gambling, but it's a form of gambling. There's a difference between a game of skill and a game of chance.
Yes, but it was exempted from a gambling bill.
And I agree, as were state lotteries. And you'll have people swear state lotteries are not gambling.
Absolutely.
They are a form of gambling. I personally feel that sports betting is more of a game of skill than anything. That's what I believe. And you ask any sports bettor, they'll tell you the same thing. It requires a lot of skill, a lot of research, even maybe more so than Daily Fantasy Sports. So I understand the argument, and I do agree with it. I think when you're talking about gambling, I think, okay, slot machines, online bingo, online slots, okay, that's gambling. I would actually throw lotteries into that. But we did say the dirty G word a few times. I think this last session we were actually approaching it as it was gambling. We did have somebody from the Maltese government.
Malta was here.
Here at the last event, and Malta. I was in Malta back in October. They have about 300 companies there.
No, 500. 500 online casinos are based in Malta. 10% of their GDP comes from them.
One of the things that Representative Orpagel was really surprised by, because they're trying to figure out how to. Now, Wisconsin's a very friendly state towards towards daily fantasy sports. Even the AG, not interested. He's neutral. They're looking to
But
charge.
he gave his presentation as a keynote. He said, "Look, we looked at the federal legislation first, and then framed everything based on that. And then he looked at the Florida legislation. He looked at some other legislation.
No, he wants to be as fair as possible.
No. But he did look at other legislations before he started writing up.
But one of the things that was definitely of interest to him was, why can't Wisconsin be another Malta? We are encouraging companies to move to Wisconsin and charge them a fee to be operating from there. Charge them a licensing fee to be operating for Wisconsin. Work with your fellow states, because a lot of states can care less. They're not going to care, and they don't have the infrastructure in place to go out and license. We already know who's ever going aggressively right now, whichever state, we know are the states that are going to be doing that. We don't expect, unless there's a change in who's in the elections, who's running, who's the new AG, whatever. There could be change. We've seen it with online gambling. When I first entered the industry, there were 4 states. Those 4 states are no longer a big issue. Later on, it became Washington State, Maryland, and New York. Originally, it was Wisconsin. Believe it or not, no offense to Representative Orpagel, but Wisconsin, Missouri, and Indiana was another one that was aggressively going after online gambling. And it all depends. It all depends on the legislation, who's in power.
Well, when these AGs look at it, basically they're looking at it as money in the till, right? This is money that they can collect for penalties and things like that they can collect as revenue.
I get it, but I think his approach, and he was very interested.
The interesting thing now is, even when they're looking at it the other way around, legislating, and originally $150,000, $300,000, $500,000 licensing fees, and now Indiana comes back with saying, hey, let's be more reasonable, $5,000 licensing fee. But even with that, based on the numbers that I had just gone through, about, let's say, $7.50 a month a player, I mean, these licensing fees, I mean, that's just one state, right? $5,000 for, let's say, Indiana. Now you got 50 states.
And he understands
that. It just conceivably, economically doesn't make any sense. Gravity must take hold here.
Yeah. One of the things with Representative Orpagel is that I'm sure he met with the representative from Malta, because they've been doing this for years with online gambling. He explained how it works. It's based on pretty much how big the company is, how much of a cut.
Yeah, but it's still,
and his price is not his.
Online gambling in Malta, the licensing fee is €500,000. That's the licensing fee. That's what it is. But that's online gambling. That's casino. That's where the money that comes in. I mean, okay, you could pay out, let's say for slots, you pay out 98.5%. However, when you play, I mean, over time, you may win some, but you're going to lose and win and lose, win and lose. But the idea is you're playing all your money off. So usually most people, they put money in, they win and lose, win, lose, win, lose, and then over time you lose everything that you bet. That's called the nature of gambling. So in the case of a €500,000 fee, you're going to get it back if you've got enough marketing dollars and enough push. But in the case of this industry, the model, the way it is, let's say 90 to 95% of every dollar that you collect, you're putting back out to that same pool. You're only collecting 5 to 10%. It's not like gambling where it's going down. You know, you're getting all that money over time.
Mark, one of the things I guess I'm trying to say is that coming to this conference opened his eyes.
Right.
Because he gets to speak with other people, he gets to speak with other experts, he gets to speak with operators. That's why these conferences are so important. And believe me, he understood, because he's willing to work with these guys. He realizes there was a number thrown out, 50,000, and I know they're really studying it right now. Okay, exactly. The little guy, DraftKings and FanDuel will have no problem paying 50,000, paying 100,000 per state.
I think they will. Let's start.
Maybe I'm exaggerating, but my point is this: the little guys cannot do that.
Even if it was 100,000 per state, times 50 states, that's $5 million just in licensing fees.
How much do you think DraftKings has that money?
$5 million just in licensing.
And there is a concern. We didn't discuss it. Well, we talked about it a little bit on this panel. There's a concern that DraftKings and FanDuel can keep the little guys out by encouraging One of the states was brought to my attention was 50,000, Virginia. That's about to be signed off on. Anyway, no, it was a very good conference. I'm looking forward to the next one. I think the next one should be bigger than, bigger than both of these combined, because at that point we should have
everything should work out.
We should understand what's going on in New York with Attorney General Schneiderman. We should have some answers by then. We definitely will, whether they're allowed to operate or not. Will it have an impact? It will have a slight impact, but we already know from speaking with Representative Borpagel that a lot of states, Wisconsin's neutral, and that's the case with most. And you're going to see, like I said before, we're going to see ups and downs. Who's ever in power? You're going to see some states down the road. It's just like horse racing. Believe it or not, online horse racing, it's illegal in probably about over a dozen, I want to say about 16 states, it's illegal. You can't. But that's up and down, because one year, Texas, it's okay. Next year, it's not. And there's other states the same way. You'll find it's illegal next year. A state that's illegal now, it'll be fine in another year. And it's going to be the same thing. I think that's the daily fantasy sports industry is going to mimic horse racing in that respect.
And we're doing fine. We're looking at international events, obviously. We see, obviously, that's the much
And we had a lot of quite a few.
None of the U.S. issues matter out there. They don't care about them. They don't deal with them. And actually, for those of you that are looking at international, there are different terminologies. So, for example, in Germany, fantasy sports does not exist as a term. It's not understandable. It's called football manager. That's what they call it. And so it's just some interesting things that I picked up in some of these sessions that were here. That very important to know as far as operators and looking at international. And that's what most of this conference did focus on. A good portion of it were like, hey, that's where the real opportunities are right now. I mean, right now everything's in flux here. While you're looking at that, at least look at Asia and
we're also finding that a lot of existing online gambling companies are looking to bring. If you're in software for this industry, forget it. You're gonna make a killing.
the white label providers,
content-wise, you're gonna make a killing.
the private label providers, yeah, that they're very happy at this event.
The gaming industry is looking. Even the casinos in Vegas, they got a little scared off because the gaming commission there scared away DraftKings and FanDuel. So now they have to, as always, the bureaucracy, they have to take a step back. The existing online European companies, and a lot of them in South and Central America, in the Caribbean, are very much interested in having DFS sites, which
that's
was
where you
not
have to
the
look
case
at it from an investor
last
standpoint.
year.
So if you were an investor and you were looking at starting a fantasy sports site now, currently today in the United States, and you want to exist in the United States, knowing what took place in New York and in Boston, if you start one, there's a chance you would be investigated, so why bother making a business here in the States? So that's the reason why.
It was also that these companies have existing customer base, which complements a daily fantasy sports.
However, if you're in Europe or you're in Asia, you're looking at your market in Europe or Asia, totally different animal there. The things are already decided. Some are not decided, but not being looked at. It's not being looked at the way it's looked at here. And it's basically a fresh market. It's like literally turning back the clock for online casino back to like 2002. If you wanted to see what that was like for fantasy sports, that's kind of what it was like. And that's a very rare and unique opportunity that I've seen.
Yes.
So, anyway, thanks, Chris, for hosting the final panel. It was
sure, I was happy to do it, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, I'll be back here next year, and as I said, things will clean up.
And by the way, anybody who, this is a great place this time of year in Miami Beach. A few of the people that, even with somebody on our panel, I'm not gonna mention names, wandered in late. He had a great time last night. So Miami Beach is a lot of fun.
Yes, Hussein is definitely a character.
That's his name.
That's fine.
Hussein, I don't know how to say from Fantasy Couch.com.
Hussein the Brain.
So he actually sat down, and I didn't know who he was, and he, I just handed him the microphone. I said, "What do you want to say?" And the first thing he said was, "Oh, I just woke up." It's ours started at 3:30. He wandered in about 4:15, so it gives you an idea. Everything closes at 5 here in Miami Beach, and great bars, great.
No, you don't have to sell Miami.
And this is a great time. Well,
it doesn't have to be sold.
This is a great time of year. Living here, I live here. So.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you at the next DFSE. Thanks, Chris.
you.